Hello everyone, welcome to today's Substance live stream. We're so glad to have everyone join us. My name is Wes and I'm going to be your host for today, and with me I have two very special guests. So starting off, I have with me Gaetan. Gaetan is a lead technical artist with the Substance Source team. He's going to be presenting to us some information about the Substance Source signature drops and give us a little information on how we work with artists behind the scenes.
Hey everyone.
And coming up next after that, we are going to have with us a very honored guest, Enrico. Enrico is an environment artist with Counterplay Games. And Enrico is, he's actually created some materials for our most recent, Substance signature source drop. He has the fantasy drop, which we have 15 very high quality, awesome materials. And Enrico is going to give us a kind of a walkthrough or a deep dive in the creation of one of these materials here today in our presentation. So hey guys, so great to see you, everybody here. So let's just go ahead and just do another little more personal round of introductions. So Gaetan, let's start with you first.
Yes, so hey everyone. I'm Gaetan Lassagne. I'm lead technical artist on the Substance Source team. So yeah, just a small background. I started at Algorithmic around 12 years ago, and I'm taking care of the content production with the source team. So it includes 13 people, and we are around 10 technical artists who work to create content for the platform, but also sometimes for the softwares. So yes, I guess that's a small introduction, but that's the idea.
Great, thank you, Gaetan. And man, I've had the great honor of working with you at my time at Substance. So I can definitely say, man, you're an awesome dude and an amazing artist to work with. So thanks for joining here today, Gaetan. So also, next up, Enrico. Enrico, can you give us just a little bit more information about yourself and what you do?
Yes. Hey, guys. So my name is Enrico, and I'm a self-taught artist, freelance environment and material artist. Currently, I'm working at Counterplay Games. I just started there, but I started there working as an environment artist, which has always been my dream, and with the main focus to materials.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Daniel. So today, we're going to talk about your signature source drop that you recently completed for us. And so part of the presentation is you're going to give us a walkthrough of one of your materials. So I actually have your reel queued up. I'd love to show to everyone. So if you're okay,
Awesome.
Let me just give this a play. So let's take a look, everyone. Hey, Enrico, man, that was amazing work. Thank you so much for joining us today and sharing that with us. That was awesome. So I'm really looking forward to seeing your walkthrough of the material. It's going to be awesome. So with that said, Enrico, could you go ahead and start sharing the presentation? And let's jump in and let's kick this thing off. So while you're doing that, what we're going to do, everyone watching the stream, is we're going to have a two-man presentation. And we're going to start here with Gaetan. And so with that said, Gaetan, why don't you take it away for us?
Yes, thank you, Wes. So yeah, the idea is to present you the goals of signature drops we do for Substance Source. and also let you know how we work with artists and give you some feedback on this side. So the goal of Signature Drop is to work with top artists from the community. So that's a good way for us to showcase what they do, also to showcase what it's possible to do with our softwares, which is always cool for us. And also it's a kind of recognition of the work done by the artists, because it's a good way for us to promote them and to be sure that we also get some feedback from them, and that we add some new content that also makes sense on Substance Source. It's also a good way for the community to learn from the best Substance designer artists. So they do a lot of content. There is a lot of nice artists, but the idea is sometimes it can be difficult to know how they do things, to know how they work. So it's a good way to make the content available to the community. And that's also one of the points of Substance Source, is that you have access to the SBS files, which are the source files. So everyone can deep dive into the graph and look at how it's done and the different workflows artists can have. It's also a good way for us to add some different team and different styles on Substance Source, because we try when we create things with the team to identify main areas we may need to provide content to, but sometimes we don't go into specific thematics and into specific styles and things like this. So that's also a good way to add some sensibility, some style into the materials based on the artist backgrounds and what they like to do. It's also a good way for the community and for us to still be inspired by what is done outside of the team, and to have ideas for the different projects, to have ideas about materials you can imagine to create, and to start to create new things. And also, it's more from a team point of view. It's also a good way to keep the link with the community. It's something we do a lot for the softwares, but it's also important to do it for the content, because when we work with artists, it's also a good way to know what we can improve, what we get feedback on what we do, and get feedback on the tools and how they can be used, and what kind of feedback Substance designer masters may have on this side. So maybe you can switch to the next slide, please, Enrico.
Yes.
Thank you. So this one is more from the Substance team side. So when we work with signature artists, the idea is to provide some guidelines regarding the way content need to be created. So we let artists create what they want and the theme they want to start to work with, but we have to be sure to keep a continuity with what we already provided on Substance Source, to be sure that we get some good performances based on different users' configurations, because not everyone have very nice GPUs, depending on the configuration you may have, depending on the I don't know, the game you work on, you may have some specificities. So yeah, performances is very important for us. Also, the modularity of the graph, the way it's constructed, we try to split the graph parts into frames you can imagine to reuse and to get the possibility to use again in the graph you will create, and also to be sure that we are consistent on the user experience side, to be sure that parameters names are correct, they behave correctly, they make sense, they are placed correctly, and they are easy to be used by our users and by us regarding the materials. Also, we provide some support So we cover different aspects artists may not be familiar with. So it can be function creation, presets, optimization, best practices. So we have different guidelines on this side, and we also take time sometimes to talk with the artist to work on this. It's also always interesting to get some feedback regarding debug technical questions you may have. Sometimes you get some issues with one graph, so it's always useful to have the team on our side to do some support on this side. And that's also super important regarding the testing point, to be sure that the materials behaves correctly, and when you use them, you don't get mismatch or something that doesn't make sense regarding the way it's generated. And regarding dynamic materials, you can have a lot of combinations, so it's very important for us. On our side again, it's a work from the whole team, and Anthony Benia also, which is our QA engineer. We do a lot of work on this side to be sure that artists get all the feedback they need to work on the signature drop. Also, again, from our side, it's to provide another point of view, get some external feedback. I think it's also useful to do it with other people. But when you are highly focused on something, it's always great to get this kind of feedback and see things you don't necessarily notice when you create the material. That also happened on what we do internally, so it's always useful. And also be aside during the creation process. So specification of the materials, creation, so it's more on the content team part, but also deployment on the platform with the web team, work with the communication team for the article, for the blog post, and also for the live stream with Wes. So it's a lot of people behind this kind of thing. So I guess that's all on my side. Maybe Enrico, if you want to deep dive into what you did.
Well, actually, Gaetan, I have a question for you, actually, if it's all right. Just one step back. So I'll tell you something that I've had some users ask me about is in terms of Substance Source. So you had mentioned earlier something about, being able to create parameters and consistency. And I know that when you look at a substance, there may be some parameters that the author themselves create, but then every substance material that you get from Source also has these advanced parameters, which are more geared around, which looks like image processing stuff. So if I understand correctly, that is the part that your team basically, like every substance that comes through Source needs to have these advanced parameters. Is that correct?
Yes, we have basic parameters, the ones we call technical parameters, the ones you usually want on every material. So it's normal intensity, for example, normal format, things that make sense from a technical point of view. And we try to create other parameters that are more dedicated to each material, and that can vary a lot based on the kind of material you will have, and that makes sense from a material point of view to be sure that you have everything you need to modify the material. Again, it depends a lot of the kind of material you have, because for example, when we work with scans, you will not have the same possibilities you may have with a full procedural material. You can imagine to modify a lot. So it really depends on the kind of material, but that's the idea.
Oh, cool. Thank you, Gaetan. So sorry, Enrico, question right in the middle there. Why don't we transition right into what you're going to show us, which is actually going to be a walkthrough of one of the materials that you created. That's correct, right?
Yes. I'm just going to go through briefly about me as well.
Okay.
So I'm a self-taught artist from Estonia and Pärnu. A lot of people don't know that this kind of Estonia even exists or is an actual country. And by a self-taught artist, I mean that I mostly relied on actually like some of the tutorials that Wes have created and a lot of online courses. So I actually didn't have the opportunity to go to universities. But I had to learn a lot from the mistakes. So it's like whenever I created something, then I made tons of mistakes, and I think it's one of the best ways of learning. And when I actually started learning it, I didn't even think that I want to be a material artist. Like I never wanted to be that at first. And I accidentally stumbled across designer, and then I found that, oh, cool, this actually you can do like very creative stuff with it. So it was super cool. And my artwork actually got heavily known because of ArtStation. So I'm super thankful for the community that was supporting my art. Like I think if ArtStation and like a Facebook group called 10,000 Hours, if those platforms didn't exist, I'm fairly sure that I wouldn't be in here where I am right now. And I started out as a freelance artist, actually, to small indie companies in Estonia, and then I got a super good opportunity to come and live in Barcelona, where I'm currently at as well. I worked at Ubisoft Barcelona, and from there I went to freelance again, and I started working at Counterplay Games as an environment artist right now, where my focus is, as I said before as well, it's heavily on material creation. And just talking briefly about from my side as well on the Substance signature project, it's it at first, like I think like when I got the email, I was showing that to everyone at the Ubisoft, saying like, oh guys, look at this, like I got a super cool email, like I might be doing the signature series, and everybody was just super happy and super supportive about it. But at that point, it was just the first email. Like I think I didn't even respond back. I was just savoring the moment. But yeah, like when I actually started doing it, then the source team or Substance teams themselves were super helpful, and they didn't limit me or with any way. So they just told me to pick a theme that's most comfortable with me and something that I really and truly want to create. And they sent over a bunch of technical requirements and the things that I needed to do, which was something that I've never done before, because I worked at when I worked at CG Textures and right now as well at Counterplay Games, it's so that you just create something that looks very nice. Like you want the end result to look good. And with the signature project is so that you want everything to be very technically approved as well, which is very good as well, and something that I haven't had much experience in. But at least, I mean, like the team with like Gaetan and Anthony, like everybody was giving me super good feedback whenever I sent them some progress. That was very, very helpful along the way. And yeah, I think like, as you can see, it's the fantasy battlefield collection. So the heavy influences from Lord of the Rings and Game of Thrones universes, where it's the continuous battle between good and evil. And for some reason, it has always stuck with me. So I imagine creating something that could illustrate the same kind of theme. And it was, at first, it was very, very daunting, I think is the word, when I was looking at the materials that were created by the previous artist, and the quality bar that was so high. It's I think the most of the time when I was working on the materials, I spent on the details trying to match what was already done, because the quality bar was very, very high. And also with the technical requirements, there was a limited budget for every material. But then again, it was cool to see that you can push the same quality and optimize the graph so that the graph is going to be like loading super fast, and you can get the same quality, which again, Gaetan and Anthony were helping me out with. But yeah, like that's it about from my presentation, and I will just jump into Designer then. And I will be taking apart the ancient fantasy map generator that I made. And like the graph itself is not actually as difficult. I think the lines are a little bit unorganized from my part, which might make it look a little bit scary to look at first. But in overall, it was a fairly simple graph, I think. So I started off with a shape, a paraboloid shape. I run it through from multiple, excuse me. Yeah, I ran it through multiple warps, and one of the new nodes called multi-directional warp. It's I think one of the best nodes right now in Designer. It gives so many variety. It's like slope blur, grayscale. I think everybody knows about that node as well. Like these two nodes are one of the nodes that I usually use the most to make aged version of whatever I want to make in my materials. So yes, I started out with the paraboloid shape, and I ran it through multi-directional warp so that it's not going to be a uniform look. And this is for the landscape, if I didn't mention it before. And I did it again with multi-directional warp again, just blending it in and warping it even more, so it's going to have very irregular areas, so it's not going to just go smoothly around. And I like to use histogram scan to clamp the values together, because if you ever want to use it as a slider, then with levels it's going to be more difficult, but with histogram scan and range and all of them, you can just expose the position, for example, and you can get a lot of different results already.
Enrico, sorry to interrupt you, man. Just a quick question. So already, like with the set of nodes you're showing, and I see where this basically is making up the central part of the map. So just a question here, like how did you know to do that? Like, was it just a matter of you saying, well, I have this idea in my head of what I want to do. I'm gonna just try a few nodes to try to make what I visualize in my head, actually work? Or did you just, like, I guess the question that people want to ask is how do you know what nodes to choose? Like, how did you know to do that? You make this up on your own?
Yeah, it's I think it's the more you use Designer, the more you're gonna like unconsciously think about the nodes and which effects they're gonna give. So right off the bat, I was like, I knew that I need a circular shape, and the best way to warp them, it's just paraboloid, because you can clamp different values from that. And like, I think the more you work with height maps, the more you can understand how they work. And yeah, it's like the more you use the nodes, the more familiar you're gonna get. Like, for example, slope blur grayscale is the node that I use a lot. And if you go through my graphs, you can see that I rarely use any other noise than just clouds 2 and black and white noise 2. Because like I've seen the effects that everything is giving me, so I have my own like mindset already with around 10 nodes that I constantly use, and I know what effects they're gonna give. And yeah, that's probably that, I guess.
Okay, cool.
It just
Thanks,
comes
man.
with yeah.
Just experience.
Yeah,
huh?
if
Yeah.
there's any, yeah, like if there is any other questions, like don't be afraid to actually like ask them at the same time as well. It's all good by me. But yeah, like moving on, it's for the lakes. I just used again clouds 2, as I was just saying. Like I used the same nodes because I'm familiar with the effects they're gonna give. I ran it through Blur HQ because just the blur itself is gonna give kind of a pixelized version of it, and I wanted to have it more smooth. And then I just multiplied over so that only the landscape itself is gonna have the lakes. And from there, I used edge detect with another edge detect to have the coastline. And this material itself was more towards, like, you can see it as well that the height map was very, very simple. And most of the material building was just in the base color. So it was kind of a cool experience in a way that you can't rely on the height and the shapes that the height map generates, like the AO and so on. But you actually have to find more creative ways of how to make the base color look now. So yeah, like I went through edge detect to have this shoreline. I started out with one that is more thicker. And then it just basically gave me like a lot of lines. Then it just, yeah, multiple ones mixed together. And all of these are fed into the actual base color. It might be a little bit difficult to understand it now, but I will just go through the shape generations, and then I will jump into the actual base color, which is going to be the last step for the material, and then like everything hopefully is going to come together. And for the water itself, like it's a small detail, but I wanted to create some small waves. And I think Gaetan already knows that as well, and Anthony, that, or everyone that I was battling with the Substance team a lot, that I wanted to use tile sampler a lot, which I think every artist is using, but I didn't know that it's very costly to use it. So if you see the timing here, just tile random and tile generators are going to be like 0.5 milliseconds versus tile sampler, which is 170 already. So I was forced to use the tile random and tile generator a lot. And yeah, like I just, like simple maskings were doing the same effect that you were usually use with tile samplers and you fed in the mask. But if you just blur it out, it's basically giving the same look. And even if you want to push it even more, you can just use warping to mask out all the waves themselves. So it's like with the Substance project, it's like it gave me so much more creative ideas on how to tackle problems because you have a limited budget. So it was super cool to try out ideas and workflows that, you know, like you don't usually think about. You just go into automatic mode and just, you know, just build your materials. And with the mountains, what I did is I created like a rock generator. And from the rock generator, I made it so that it's gonna have like sharp edges and cliffs. And with that, I used one of the new nodes as well, height extrude. Well, it's not as new, but one of the newest ones. And just by extruding it outwards, you actually cut in the edge detect mountains. So they're gonna have like a clean transition from the ground to the actual mountains. Yes, and for how the mountain range itself is, then it's just a mass map input here, which is like you can see that they used edge detect quite a lot. So I just used crystals, edge detect, I warped it a little bit with the directional warp. I got away the actual landscape area, and then I fed it into the mask input. And I also used a scaled input. I haven't used that quite that much, but with the shape input, no, the scale map input, sorry, I used non-uniform blur from the landscape and fed it to the scale map input, and which that gave is that all around the edges, the mountains are going to get smaller, so that I'm not going to have really, really big mountains just on the coastline, but it's going to smooth the transition to the more middle you are, the bigger mountains there are going to be. And with the mountains, I just used, again, like as you can see, like I use multi-directional warp like quite often. I just warp them to make them less uniform and, you know, more organic look. And here I'm just already adding in the coastline as well, because I was using the same colors for the map so that all the lines in the mountains and the forest are going to have the same markings, or the color for the markings. And yes, like for the rivers here, I blurred out the mountains, and I subtracted them so that I can use the non-uniform blur and just blur it even more. And all of that, what it's giving is that I can warp just the basic cracks from cells 4. to make the rivers so that they're not gonna go over the mountains and they're gonna actually warp behind them. So if we can actually take the parameter, I think this is, if I add it more, then you can see that the rivers are like flowing around and not into the mountains or the forests as much. And I also made the compass sign, which at first I was like, okay, how am I gonna do that with a limited budget? So with this one, I just started out with the polygon, and I noticed that polygon 1 is much cheaper performance-wise than polygon 2, even though it has more parameters and you can have the gradients and everything here. And with that, I used transformation to make it a little bit smaller. I cut off from halfway one part. I used edge detect and just blended them together. And with splatter circular, I just used it as 4 of them. And blending them together, it's very, very quickly getting the compass sign. And also from the references that I saw is that they have these kinds of lines. I'm not entirely sure what they are, but almost every map had them. So I also used just the starburst and used transform 2D to just place them differently around, and all of that just blended together into the base color. And with the base color itself, it's so that I tend to always start off with some crunch maps, but crunch maps are very heavy performance-wise. So again, like the Substance team knows how much I was like always going and trying to maybe I can use like the crunch maps, and they weren't very happy about it at first. But yeah, they gave me some tips on how to actually use what. And this workflow is, if I'm not wrong, I think it's from Ben Wilson that I learned, where he uses a noise and that goes through non-uniform directional warp. And what it gives is this kind of noise that you can just, like a crunch map. And if you just run it through a gradient map, you're gonna have like tons and tons of color information. Like if I just take a simple gradient, it's gonna have a very, very rich palette of colors. I think it's very useful to use, like even just these two nodes together, they're gonna give like very nice variation to the base color. So yeah, I used that mixed with just a uniform color. And I got a subtle brownish color, which went through multiple iterations of color treatment itself. And for the landscape, again, like the colors, I basically used like uniform colors because they were very, very cheap on performance-wise to use them. And one by one, I started to then blend everything in. So here's the non-uniform blur that I was talking about, the scale map before. It's using just the mountain ranges to make them a little bit more darker, and then actually adding the mountains in. But you can see that this color here, like the black color, is used on all these blends. So one by one, I was just adding them together. With the rivers and the waves as well. Oh yeah, and the forest as well. Like forest was kind of tricky a little bit because what we saw was testing it with forest and the mountains as well, is that the mass map threshold had to be 9. Go to 1 with one of the engines, it just makes everything disappear for some reason. And I had to mask out the actual area of the mountains and then the landscape, and I needed to have some randomization, so I had again clouds 2, just multiply it over of the landscape. And yeah, from that it was just the forest itself. And I think I've made the forest a little bit lighter as well, so it's a little bit more easier to read. But at least with these masks, it's so that they're going to generate different variations without actually interfering. It's not going to intersect with the mountains themselves, so you have like different variations and styles to them. And there's again like some small details that I think like a lot of people won't even notice, but I've always liked to add these details. Like if you zoom out, you're never going to see these small speckles of dirt or dust. And at least when I'm making the materials, it's always like it's the small details that count. Like you can make everything look super nice, but even with making rock cliffs, for example, it has always been so that you can make the base cliff shape and a non-uniform directional warp that gave me that kind of grungy look. And just all of them just multiplying and adding them over. And one of the things that I was struggling a little bit was to make the parameters, was so that I had to make the ranges from 0 to 1. And I had ranges, for example, if you have histogram scan, and you know that you want to have the value between 0.24 to 0.82. So I think it was Gaetan who showed me this, which is just you expose it as an empty function, and then you're going to get your float, and you're going to have just few floats lerp together, and you just need to set the lerp as an output, and then it's going to just make the values between 0.04 to 0.08, converting into the range of 0 to 1. So yeah, I think that was like one of the most eye-opening things to me. So if I go to the preview, like all of the settings are 0.1, even I think in the technical parameters as well, I had to manually change the normal format, a normal intensity, so you can actually change it yourself. And like all these technical things, I've never been good with technical side, and it was very eye-opening to have this project and people that actually know how to work with maths and functions and teach you all of these things. Like that was a super great experience with that. And optimizing as well, I used just the full range of the gradients, and I was told to just go to -5 and just set this one here to relative to parent, and you're gonna have your graph the same resolution here, but it's gonna be much more optimized. And yeah, the height map itself, it's very simple. It's just gradient linear 3 tiled 2 times mixed together with crystal noise, which is warped just a little bit as well, and it gives like a crumpled paper look that you can see here as well. Yeah. And for the height itself, I had to go full range from black to white, so you can do it manual as well, but I'd like to use auto levels for that. And yeah, it's overall, like the graph itself was more towards like the base color, so I didn't have to focus on the height information and building the height that much. But I did have to use the same principles that I was using, like especially with the tile sampler, to know how to mask out mountains and how to distribute them so they're not going to intersect. And I can use edge detect to actually cut them out nicely without actually getting, like for example, these areas here. They had to be done in a way that you're not going to cut out the tip of the mountain. Yeah, like I think I went a little bit too fast with this material. Like maybe it's possible to have some questions coming in, so I can actually go through it.
Oh, no, that's okay, Enrico. So, yeah, we're going to do a full Q&A session right after this. So yeah, I mean, do you have some more you'd like to show in the note, or do you want to just switch on over to the Q&A portion?
I think I went over most of it. Like there's like small things, yes, here as well. Like I can go through them as well if needed, but they are like very, I guess like more simpler things. Like it's just making crunch maps yourself, and I think I went over most of it.
Okay, well,
Yeah.
perfect, man. Let's just transition right into the Q&A then. So here, let me. Marine has been feeding those over to me. So like I said, we're gonna transition over into the QA. Let me just get these things queued up here. Let's see here. So just getting the list all set up. Okay, so we'll start at the very beginning. So are these renders made in Substance iRay? So a lot of these are for you, Enrico. And I guess what they're asking in this case was, I guess the full renders, the renders that you had to do at the very beginning, like the ones I kind of showed, your 15. Like how were you creating those?
Oh, I'm using Marmoset Toolbag. I think every material artist now is using it, and in my personal opinion, I think like using Marmoset is the same as using a game engine to showcase them. Like because my work is mostly done for games themselves, and Marmoset Toolbag is already a real-time rendering engine. So yeah, I think Marmoset is a good way of going, and I do all my renders there. It's easy to manage and easy to test out anything, and how you can set up multiple lighting setups to see how your material reflects. And I think I was working with the materials the same way, so that every time I made a new iteration, I just exported it, and it was automatically in Marmoset just showing it off, so I don't have to do any manual import or export in that case. So yeah, I was using Marmoset Toolbag.
Cool, man. Okay, so the next question, it's kind of, I guess there's two questions in this here. So basically, like, how long have you been in the industry, and how long have you been doing Substance Designer?
Okay, I think I've been like learning the game art on my own around 10 years now. This is not the time that I've been actually in the industry. It's just, roughly the first time that I opened up Maya and started modeling my first building, I think. But as a material artist, I think I've been working around 4 or 5 years now, at least learning that long. And I started off in the industry now like 3 or 4 years ago. And it started out small with some indie companies. And yeah, I think coming to Ubisoft was where my career started to expand much more. Yeah, it's like roughly 3 years when I was 3 or 4 years where I was able to actually make it to the industry itself.
Yeah, and then the other part of that question, which I think we can all identify with, it says it was just saying I'm just starting out, and it becomes depressing seeing all these amazing materials. Hold on, this thing is updating on me here. Let's see here. Okay, so it's just saying basically it was depressing seeing all these amazing materials and not being able to replicate that themselves. And I think I don't know, I don't want to speak for everybody, but I'm pretty sure we all feel like that. Like I know that every time I see your work, and I'm like, okay, I quit. I'm not doing this anymore. So I'm sure, Enrico, you probably feel the same way. I mean, I can tell you right now, personally, working with someone like Gaetan, like you look at what he's doing, and yeah, I definitely every day I'm like, okay, I quit. But yeah, so I think it's just something we all share as artists, which is something that it's just one of those things. Like, yeah, I think everybody feels that way. But the most important thing is, in my opinion, is just to make sure you're having fun. Don't stress about it. Just try your best, have fun, and that's what it's really all about. I mean, if you're not having fun with it and it's frustrating, then it's no use in doing it. So yeah. But what do you guys think, Gaetan? This same to you. I mean, I'm sure we all feel this way.
Yes, I think it's important to start with the first thing when you start practicing in Substance Designer is to start with some simple material and with something that you want to do. So yeah, I would say not to start with crazy patterns and things like this, but starting with something simple And starting with, let's say, a classic exercise like creating a brick wall and things like this, even if it's not something you will showcase in your portfolio or elsewhere, it's still useful because you will learn. And as Enrico mentioned before, that's also by practicing, you learn what kind of nodes you want to use and what are the best practices regarding the graph creation.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Like, when I first started out, like my main materials were just rock cliffs, like things that you want to make it look like cool, and you want to have fun. Like if you're gonna dive into how to use, like how to make pipes on sci-fi style material, like you're gonna drive yourself crazy. Like it's the most important thing. I will agree. Yeah, like you guys said as well. That's have fun and make something that you're gonna like it as well. Like don't rely on what the community makes, because like believe me, like I'm still right now as well, like I'm jealous of what Daniel Tiger can do, and it's almost impossible for me to match the quality. But at the same time, it's it's a motivation. Like if you start out and you see somebody doing that, you know that there's a potential for you to do the same. So I would just have fun and see where it leads. And if you actually see, like I started out with designer and I didn't have any skills. Like that would have been actually cool to show the first materials that I made, and they were so bad. They were really, really, really bad. Like, yeah, like it's like you should have fun.
Yeah. Okay, so some more questions in here. Do you do any 3D modeling, or do you just focus mainly just solely on material creation?
I'm trying to get myself more into modeling. I've been out of 3D modeling now for quite some time, and with all kinds of projects in the way, like I haven't done modeling that much anymore. But as a material artist, I think the modeling itself is a skill, like a required skill, because you do need to do some small modeling as a material artist as well to test out something in a specific place or in a specific angle. For example, if you want to make a dirt pile, you need to actually model the dirt pile and you need to place it. And using trim sheets, for example, you need to know the modeling techniques and how to actually apply that as well. So yeah, like I do modeling every now and again. I'm trying to get myself more into that because I think my dream thing would be actually be an environment artist rather than material artist. But I'm honestly enjoying doing materials, and it comes much easier to me with materials than actual modeling itself.
So I guess another question to that is kind of a follow-up, like what advice can you give to a new Substance designer artist?
Well, like we talked before, I think it's just have fun.
Yeah.
Like I started out in the industry so that, or just learning even 3D was because we had a bet with my cousin, like who can model faster a building, like, just having fun. So we just stayed up all night trying to model something. It came out very badly, but we had fun, and that led me actually, starting in the industry. So somebody who's starting out in designer, like have fun, test out new things, and see like maybe there's untouched potential.
Yeah, and
untapped potential.
And
Yes.
Gaetan, I really like what you said about starting small. Like pick something very simple. Like let's see if I can do a brick wall. Don't try to climb like a huge mountain. Just kind of take it one step at a time, which was good advice. Let's see. Okay, so here's another question. This one is: in what instance would you choose a spec gloss workflow over metallic roughness?
Honestly, like I think that very few people are using spec gloss workflow, but in honesty, like you can convert the maps already very, very easily in Designer. So metallic roughness, it's much easier to grasp and understand. So you have, like most of the times, you have a fixed value for metallic places. So if you have metal and rust is non-metallic, metal is metallic, and that's it. But with the spec gloss, you need a lot more knowledge of the material, and you need to know how to balance everything out. So like I would choose metal rough workflow over spec gloss, because it's easy to understand and to work with. And I think in a production mindset as well, I think it's faster.
And Gaetan, on the end of Substance Source team, like, I mean, with substances, we always have to support both. Is that right?
Yes, what we tend to do is to create the material in metallic roughness because we have the possibility later to convert them to specular glossiness, which may be very tricky to do on the other side. So yeah, we have this converter that already exists in Substance Designer we use at the end of the graph we create for Substance Source that will allow you to convert the maps. So you can imagine to convert from PBR metallic roughness to specular glossiness, also to convert to V-Ray materials, for example, if you need to export for V-Ray materials. So you can imagine to do the setup you want in Substance Designer. And yeah, as Enrico said, it's a good way to work with metallic roughness because you let's say it's more convenient in the way to create the material. And also you don't have to take care of some aspects regarding the specular color and the balance between the values you use in the diffuse and the specular, and be sure that everything is fine on this side. It makes more sense. It's more logic usually in the way people think to work with metallic roughness, but again, it depends on what you want to do in the end and what you prefer. Which can be different for each person.
Okay, cool. Thank you. Okay, so Enrico, this one's for you, probably specifically for this material. But did you prepare some sketch or draft before you started creating this material?
For this one, no. For some of the other ones, yes, I kind of opened up Photoshop and drew a little bit to understand how to balance the scale. But with this one, it was I had quite a lot of reference images, so I already fairly knew what I want to achieve. But yeah, for some materials, yeah, I do draw out like shapes or something to actually know what I'm trying to get, because it's a little bit hard sometimes to imagine the actual pattern or what you want to achieve, because there was like one material that I made which was called the Spanish house wall, which is like I was walking around in Barcelona and saw the buildings, took a few screenshots, and with that material, it's at first I was like, how can I actually create it? So I actually drew out a little bit to understand that there are going to be multiple components and everything has to have different levels for each of the height map value. So yeah, like it's needed for some materials, but it's like a very like 10% of the cases, I think, with the materials, at least for me when I'm creating them. Yeah.
So with this material, like, can you gauge like how many hours or how many work hours from beginning to end did it take you to do this?
Well, because I was learning the technical requirements for it and doing the parameters and things, then that was giving me quite a lot of more hours or days even to actually finish it up. But the material itself, like the first draft, I think, like it's something that can be already production ready if you just want to export the bitmaps out. It's 1 to 2 days, roughly.
Okay, so let's see here. Several more questions. Again, this one's for you, Enrico. So how long did it take for you to get into Ubisoft? It says when he started learning designer, after how many years was he mailed from Ubisoft? Okay, so basically, like, how long did it take you to get into Ubisoft, would you say? I guess maybe from like beginner level.
Yes, that's actually a nice question, because not a lot of people know that, but when I actually started out, like it wasn't an easy road. Like I was constantly updating my portfolio, and I applied to that position for a few years, I think, and sent like 3 times my portfolio there to apply for that position, and I didn't get it back. But it took me quite a few years actually to refine my portfolio, my skills, to actually be confident and get the actual interview and everything. So I would say like 2 years roughly, where I was like, okay, I want to be a texture artist or material artist, and I'm gonna start finding places and just applying to them and seeing what's gonna happen.
Oh, that's awesome. And
but it
so,
wasn't then.
yeah, and so you were saying that like
No,
with
go, sorry.
with some of it, like you did submit, but you didn't hear anything back. So there were several times when, like, we'll say you tried to get the job, but you didn't get it, right?
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
It's like it kind of showed me the reality that, maybe my portfolio isn't strong enough. And, it kind of gave me a motivation to, I'm going to push it as far as they're actually going to say, like, oh, cool, like, let's have an interview now.
Yeah, but that's awesome that you say it like that though too, because like I mean I guess some of us like we could say, oh, I tried to get in, I didn't get it, but you didn't give up, you just kept trying and refining your work and kept going for it. And I think the important thing is like when you have something you want to do and you have a dream, you just keep pushing for it until you get there. Which again, everybody, we, like you said before, I mean, if like you look at the work of say Daniel and he can do it, I mean we can all get there. You just got to keep trying, believing in yourself, things like that.
Yeah, exactly. I think like everybody has the potential of making the industry. It just requires a lot of works. Like there's been countless hours of, where you just work until the night and then next morning you wake up at 6 a.m. and you need to go back to work, and after work you come home, you work again, and it takes years to build up something, if you actually want to make it in the industry. Our industry is not easygoing. You need to work very, very hard.
Yeah. Okay, so another question here is, do you have a lot of trial and error with this material, or did you just know by experience what the process had to be?
Oh no, I think like the first day when I'm actually trying, like starting with the material, there's so many mistakes. Like when I was doing my streaming as well, then I think people saw it as well. Like there were times where it was so that the streaming was going like 2 or 3 or even 4 hours, and I didn't have almost anything done. Because it's just, you try some ideas out and they're just going to fail maybe. But I guess like that's the beauty of designer, that you can just, copy paste the graph or part of the graph and just retry it again. If something like goes very horribly wrong, you can just go back to it, or, you can have backups. You have like millions of backups. And I think like people should, just if you see something is going well, just copy paste it, put it a little bit aside, and try something new. And well, like as I told in the beginning as well, like the way that I stepped into the industry was so that I did trial and error, and I learned from the mistakes. So if you make the mistakes and it's gonna go bad, then you know that you're not gonna do that again.
That's good. And so let's see. Yeah, like I said, several more here. What was your source for learning designer?
Well, it was actually, like I told you as well, that your tutorials were one of those. And Rogelio, I'm afraid that I'm going to say their name wrong, but it was a cobblestone material that was done. Yeah, and it was maybe Gnomon School, but I'm not entirely sure if it was from there. But that was my first tutorial that I was learning from. And I don't know, it was kind of so that when I picked up the tutorial, it was super interesting in designer. Like, you have so many possibilities and new nodes and things that I closed the tutorial like from halfway through and just started messing around. So tutorials were more towards certain workflows that I was interested in. So I don't remember now by heart which one they were, but it's more towards, like your tutorials, for example. If I knew that I want to have a specific thing from that, then it's super easy to find it from the algorithmic YouTube. And so I just researched specific things that I wanted to learn from.
Okay, yeah. So again, several questions here that are kind of in that same category of learning. So another one here being, what's the best way to learn the nodes to use in design? In Substance to get the results you want?
I would say that use nodes even if they're not going to do a lot of effects. Like one of the nodes, for example, is I think vector morph. Yes, vector morph grayscale. Note that I'm struggling a lot. I'm still learning it. I think I started learning it a year ago, and I can't fit it into my my graphs yet. But it kind of gives me like almost right now, like half of the graphs that I create are using vector morph grayscale, because it's an effect that I don't use that much, but it gives me something new to work with. And if you use it constantly, you're going to understand how the node works and what's the possibilities with it. So I think you're going to use it much more then.
Oh yeah. Okay, that's this. I want to ask this question to you as well, Gaetan, because I just assume you know it all. So like, what do you think? Like, how do you know which nodes to use and stuff? I mean, Gaetan, what do you think?
I think it's important to maybe make a distinction between what we call the atomic nodes, the ones that are available by default when you type the spacebar. You get the list, or by just right-clicking, the one like grayscale conversion, gradient map, warp, things like this. And when you are familiar with them, you already know how to do a lot of things, because the library, what we have in the shelf, was created using those nodes and are based on those nodes. So we made some more convenient nodes, like Enrico showcased before, as histogram scan, for example, or tile generator, tile sampler, that, for example, those two are based on the FX maps. But when you know how to use the atomic nodes, you already know how to do a lot of things. It doesn't mean you have to cover all the atomic nodes, but even if you start with only 10 of them, it's a good base. And also I would recommend to check the graph from other artists. It can be from Substance Academy, Substance Source, from Gumroad, from ArtStation, whatever. But it's a good way when you deep dive into what someone already created, to learn how it's done. Again, there will be different workflows. There might be also some way to do that can be tricky or very, very personal, depending on the sensibility of the people. But yes, the idea is to take a look at how it's done. And again, as usual, there is a lot of different way to create the same thing. So yeah, the idea is to find the ones that fits more what you want to do.
Yeah. Also, something else too, like if you go to the Substance Designer documentation, we now have a really nice node library. I think it was Vincent on our team who worked on this, but it's really awesome. It lists every node, has in many cases like an animated GIF on certain types of things of how it works. I found that to be a really nice resource as well, just to kind of dig through and familiarize yourself with the nodes, kind of a short description of what they do and things like that. And that's accessible right through our docs, I think. I think this team is also still working on that quite a bit to further polish it up.
Yes, I think Lawrence and Vincent, and I guess also Luca from the Substance Designer team worked on this. And you showcase, Enrico, the vector morph, for example, and nodes like this. So if you need to get some details about one node, again, there are the videos Wes made. You can also find, again, some documentation on our website and regarding the way vector maps work. It behaves like UV distortions. So yeah, you get some more information on this side and know how to use the nodes if you have some specific questions if needed. And you also have the forum, we can answer you.
Okay, let's see. Some more questions here. Enrico, this one's, I think, more for you. This was, in your opinion, what is the most important thing to master first as an aspiring material artist?
Okay. I think understanding the height map, like when at least when I used height maps before, then as soon as you put the noise in, you think that that's the full range of everything. But if you actually push out the scale of the material from, I don't know, 5 to actually 15, then you're gonna see that there's actually like much more range to it. So you can make like windows that are gonna be inside and bricks that can actually overlay of everything and so on. Like I think mastering actually the understanding of the height map and what are the ranges that you can work with is one of the most important things. And from there on, it's, like the basic things like the noises and so on.
Okay, great. Yeah, a few more questions here. So here's another one. I think this one's really interesting too. It says, am I the only one ending up with something completely different than the material I wanted to create? If this happens to you, how do you deal with happy accidents?
Happy accidents are usually the ones that end up in my portfolio.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, yeah. I think it was Daniel Tiger in GDC talking about it as well, that he started out with some one material and ended up like with a completely different one, and then it's like, most of the material, like some of the materials there were done that way. So yeah, like half of my portfolio consists of materials that I didn't even think about doing, but halfway through you're like, oh man, like that actually looks like something else. Like yeah, it happens a lot.
Okay, Enrico, this is another question for you. Can you share what the typical day in the life of a material artist consists of?
Well, I think it's like 8 hours fully, like you're going to be in front of designer. And when you actually end up working in designer, then you're going to do personal work in designer. So you're going to have like 16 hours of working in designer. But in overall, it's, I think like as a material artist, it's very important to test out your materials with different lightings. And like I'm working a lot with the engine and actual designer, and quite a lot of times there, so that you need to accept what others are saying to you rather than actually going with your mindset. Like don't go like, yes, this is what I want, but like listening to your lead artist and your coworkers saying something to you, then working your materials or refining them. I think like that's you're just iterating throughout your material all day long until it gets approved. But mostly it consists about just creating materials. If you have a chance, then it's like making environments or environment pieces. That's pretty cool. Like you can test out actually how you were wanting the material to end up being used. So
yeah. So if you're not at work and you're just out enjoying your free time, which I'm sure you get so much of, do you find yourself just like constantly looking at real world materials and thinking, oh, how could I make this in Designer?
Yes, we had one conversation with one artist actually, that when we were working at Dikagon, and we were just laughing about it. That like I said, like, oh yeah, just the other day I went outside and I saw this thing on the ground. Like I don't know how to call it even, but it's a good reference for your material. And he was like, what? You're doing the same? So it's like, I think like a constant thing that as a material artist, you go out and when you see something, you just take like tons of pictures. That like my friends have called me crazy as well, because I take a picture of a small part on the road, for example, and it's like, yeah, I like it a lot. And it's like, what? Why?
Oh, that's funny. I see there's a comment in the chat thread. I guess echoes kind of a quote you had, which was "Happy accidents is my portfolio." That's awesome. I need that on a T-shirt. I think that's a really cool. That's funny.
Yes.
Yeah,
it's well said.
Yeah. So okay, so a couple more questions. These are kind of geared towards more like portfolio. It looks like we have two more here. Let's see. Okay, so which platform, and this is talking about like social media stuff, is very useful to get exposure in material art or 3D art in general?
I think that as an artist, you need to promote your art quite a lot, and whichever platform you find, you should use it, especially when you're starting out, because the industry is growing so rapidly that you need to stand out and you need to make yourself known and seen and noticed. So whichever platform you can use it. Like with my work, I haven't that much used Instagram, but it goes from Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, of course, ArtStation, and I think like Discord groups as well. Like sharing as much as possible your work, it's very important, and like as much as you can use. And one of the best one, I think one of the best ones is Dynasty Empire, where you get tons of feedback as well. It's super good place, and also a Facebook group called 10,000 hours. Like that's where I started out with, and there's just so many people that just a random person can come to you and say like, okay, this looks so bad. Like, why do you even have it there? But at least you're getting like honest opinions, and it's good to get that kind of that from other people, so that you know how to improve yourself rather than everyone being super friendly.
Oh yeah. And so, and also kind of adding to that question, like what are some of the best ways to show your material as portfolio pieces? Like they have like, is it close-up shots, sphere renderers, material graph, and designer?
Well, I think the graphs themselves are good if you want to put up free content for people, but I think a lot of artists are making like a small profit out of these materials, so it's like giving back to the people that are building the community if you don't share the graphs, if you know what I mean. And actually presenting the graphs, I think it's up to everyone else, like however they want to showcase themselves. There are some people that just show the sphere renders, but one of the things that is the most important is to actually have some kind of a scene render or a close-up render to actually show the details. Like it's like you need to see that you can actually use it and what the height map can do, actually the material and texture, or if possible, then use it even in engine. Like see if you can't use, because a lot of games can't use the height map or desolation that's, makes everything look beautiful. And just relying on the normal map and the reflections and, how to fake some lightings and tricks for the material. I think it's cool to show them. Like there's so many Naughty Dog artists that shared their pieces on ArtStation, and I just look through them and I'm like, how can, in engine, and it looks like it uses height map and everything, but it's just a normal map, and wow, it's really amazing like that.
Yeah. Let's see. Well, actually, some other questions coming in that are pretty good. So this is one that I think Gaetan, I'd like to throw at you as well. So it's saying, would it be wrong to create this map as an image illustration and then create the paper material? I guess basically then import that into Designer and build on top of that instead of doing it all from scratch. So I guess to kind of phrase that a bit would be like, a lot of times when we show tutorials and materials, we're doing everything procedural in Designer. Both Enrico and Gaetan, what do you guys think about, like, maybe I had like the base of this map, maybe something I did in another like Photoshop or something like that, and then imported it in and built on top of that. Is there any issue with those workflows?
No, that's okay. If you can start if you want, Enrico, as you did the material, I guess you may have also some answers, and I can continue if that's okay for you.
Yeah.
Yeah, like I don't know. I think it's fine to use both. Like I think it depends on more towards if you want to show off your skills or you want to make something like this project, for example. Like I tried not to use any bitmaps or anything like that, so that you build everything in a software that is meant for learning purposes. But in a production line, like I've used that the same way as well, that I actually make like different patterns or something, either Photoshop or Illustrator, and just use them as a base. Like it's, at least in my opinion, I don't see any bad side of it. It's more towards like if like I think like if everyone has seen Daniel Tiger's portfolio, I think everyone has, then he's one of the inspiration of people that says or like does it so that even if you have the option to do the procedure the bitmap way, then try to do it procedurally. So you're going to generate new ideas and new workflows, and it's not a bad idea to at least give it a more try and see what you can end up with, then rather than just jumping into Photoshop and going the easy way.
Yes, it's nice to mix when it makes sense. For example, when you have a specific pattern or a specific symbol, you can imagine to create it procedurally, but sometimes it's more convenient or it's more efficient to do it, for example, in Illustrator, Photoshop, or in another software. But the nice thing is that when you get familiar with Substance Designer, you can spend as much time to create the material in Designer than you will do by importing bitmaps and creating something aside, importing it. And for example, the small mountains, the small symbols, things like this. Once you have a base generator and everything you need, it's very convenient to just splat it over the map. And then in the end, if you don't like the map, if you created the shape, for example, using image editing in Photoshop or something like this, it will be some kind of static. But if you do it procedurally in Substance Designer, you can imagine to just randomize the whole map, add some rivers, for example, modify the mountains, the forest you have. Things like this regarding, for example, parameters Enrico exposed. And when you create it in a production, it's always nice if you're, for example, the art director that tells you, okay, you have to modify this. Maybe you can change this shape, or you have to modify all the mountains. It's more convenient if you just modify the base node, and then you will get everything modified at the same time and get the final result without too much modifications.
All right, guys. So another question. This is for either of you guys, really. It's basically, what should a beginner new in the industry expect in the gaming industry as a texture or modeling artist?
Okay, Tom, maybe you want to go first?
Yeah.
I will try. I'm not sure. I guess it depends. The idea is more to be focused on one goal and to be focused on one type of work and a job title. If you, for example, if you submit your candidature to technical artist position, it may be different from what you will do as an animator or someone like this. So I would say if you want to go very into modeling, but you also want to create assets from scratch to the end by doing also texturing and things like this, will be to start to have clean understanding of modeling, starting again with basic models, and try to push them to get a game ready asset as much as possible, and then start with another one, and move this way. And try to maybe not focus on a too big environment or too many portfolio pieces, but try to start with something, push it as much as possible. Maybe try to mimic something you find in one game and get the same result. I would say just a clean understanding of what you did, a clean showcase of what you know to do and what you want to work for and what you want to create at work, and go this way. I don't know if that's a very good answer, but that's a start.
No, that's good.
Yeah, like I agree with what you're saying. Like I think when you actually start off, it's very scary to see so many positions and different requirements and so on. I think it's a good idea to try out everything and see what actually fits you, rather than actually, like, not saying that there's anything wrong with it, but being a generalist in 3D industry, or like gaming industry at least, I think it's like everything about everything, but like 10% of everything. And if you're actually just focusing on, for example, environment art, you're going to be 100% into environment art, or prop artist, or material artist, and so on. And one of the biggest things that I've learned from the industry is that you need to let your ego go down a little bit, because you're going to get criticism a lot, and people are going to give you feedbacks, and it's something that it's needed to be learned, to just accept if somebody is saying that, okay, this is bad because of these reasons, and you need to be like, okay, I'm going to change it.
Yeah, that's awesome, guys. So I think what we'll do here is we'll start to just kind of wrap things up a bit. We'll just start to close out the stream. So I really just want to thank you so much, Enrico, for your time. You as well, Gaetan. I think both of you guys are amazing artists. It's been a true honor for me just to be able to sit here and talk to you guys. Also, looking at the chat, I see that Enrico, you've inspired a lot of people just from your explanations and for you sharing your time and working through your material like this. So again, thank you from all of us here on the Substance team for doing this source drop for us and for joining us here on this live stream. Gaetan, I'd like to say to you, man, dude, you have always been an amazing inspiration for me. You're a top-notch artist. It's just a pure honor to work with you. So it's awesome to have you here on the live stream as well. If you guys have any closing comments, I'm going to start rolling up our thank you slide here.
Yeah, like
yeah. Go ahead.
Oh, yeah, you go ahead. Nico.
Okay, well, yeah, I'm super thankful for that you guys actually like gave me the opportunity to do this. Like, I know it's just by saying thank you, it might not seem enough, but yeah, it was like you guys have no idea how excited I was when I actually got the first email saying that, do you want to actually do this? And I was like, are you serious? Like, algorithmic, the people that, like, I've been working towards this for a really, really long time. And, actually you guys contacted me. And for example, like Wes, your tutorials were the things that I started from. And now it's, like having like one-on-one actually like FaceTime talking and asking questions. Like it's super cool. Like I'm so thankful for that. And also like I want to just say a big thank you to the ArtStation community as well. Like it's been crazy how people have been supporting my art, and like if it wouldn't been them showing their respect and the support that they've done for my artworks, then probably I wouldn't be here even talking to you guys. So yeah, thank you for everyone.
Yeah, that is so cool. Yes, especially with our entire community, man. Everybody's so cool. Gaetan, do you have anything?
Yeah, just wanted to say thanks to Enrico, and again thanks for all the signature artists because we are not necessarily there when we do the live stream, but again Daniel Tiger, Chris Oxon, Mark Foreman, Javier Perez, Ben Wilson, Don Arceta, Kyler Wood, or Jonathan Benenus. So yeah, thanks to all of them for the nice content. And also wanted to say that I also love you, Wes.
Thanks,
and,
man.
Everybody loves you, so yeah, I guess that's that needed to be said. So yeah, that's done.
Well, thanks a lot, and everyone joining the stream today, thank you very much for your time. I know that this is it's a bit of an uncertain time for all of us here in the world, but it is wonderful that we can all get together online like this. I mean, technology allows us to still communicate and do this, and it's great. So just everybody stay positive, stay safe out there. And I also wanted just to mention to you guys that the next upcoming stream that we have. So our next live stream is going to be coming on March 19th, and we are going to take a dive into the environment and material creation of Control. Extremely awesome video game. I get choked up thinking about it. So yeah, we're really happy to be able to see that stream. So be sure to check out our Twitter feed, where I think we'll have more information on it. If you're subscribed to the YouTube channel, you should see that the stream is already up, so you can go ahead and set a reminder for that. But again, thank you guys for all joining. We're going to sign off here, and we will see you next time. Take care, everyone.